Mr. Eden?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple. I was by the original Peace Bay Cemetery a few days ago. Looked behind the wall which has been put up. The land behind there, is that part of government or oh, that come in?
Mr. Tibbetts?
Mr. Chairman, I do not have a map, but I do believe that the cemetery and the fence going down to the beach on what I would term to be the west side and the wall on the east side.
That's on the seaside?
No.
Oh.
On the roadside, that the wall on the east, which would be bordering those condos to the east. Which one are you talking about again?
The old, through you, Mr. Chairman, the old,
I'm there, forgive me, I'm in the wrong location. I'm thinking spots. Peace Bay, you say?
yes, right.
Okay. Could you just repeat again, please? I was thinking the wrong location.
Yeah,
Forgive me.
I was looking on the, through you, Mr. Chairman, looking at on the seaside of that wall, and I just assumed that being the cemetery there, that it extended toward the sea. But I noticed it's probably from 75 to 100 feet to the sea high water mark, and I wondered why it was left out, because there's been a lot of space, but evidently, I don't know.
Left out with regards to the wall.
Yes.
Through you, Mr. Chair, Mr. Eden, I'll verify that very shortly and get back to you, because I don't want to give you the wrong answer.
Okay, some of my colleagues are saying that maybe just where the wall was. Mr. Chairman, through you, the other question, not necessarily a question, but a comment as I look at the cement and paver cemetery we now have in Bordentown, and the nice wrought iron gate to keep the spirits in, whatever. If you could
Go into the sea, is governments or not?
comment on how they've arrived at that, the amount of money that has been spent, and if this also extends on the seaside, and why they're going to all of this expense to put down. I've never seen more cement in one cemetery in my life.
This one is now
The new one.
The new cemetery.
Yes, sir.
Oh. Mr. Chairman, through you to my colleague, I can only give you the sequence of events as I know them to be. I am pretty certain that Mr. Eden has been in the same position that I was in initially, because I kept seeing different things happening, kept wondering what it was all about till it started to take shape. And when I investigated, when some of his other colleagues asked me about it also, meaning Bordentown representatives, and I inquired, my understanding is that this was a contract given out by the former ministry sometime before the last election, and it was a contract out to the Public Works Department with approved plans and design and all of that work as the first phase of the additional space, additional cemetery space. The property is on the roadside going what I would call north. So that's on the roadside. So that section is only partially developed, and more vaults can be built as the land is reclaimed going further back. And there's also the piece on the beach side. The government purchased the parcel I'm not 100% sure whether both sides of the road is one parcel number or whether there are two parcel numbers, but it was the same purchase. And some people might be of the view that the cemetery should have been built on the beach side, but I can only tell you that this was an inherited project, which was in the works.
Mr. Chairman.
Chairman, I'm hearing that it could have been stopped. Unfortunately, by the time I knew about it and asked the question and saw where it was at, it really couldn't have been stopped, and it would have taken more to get it to turn the hands of time back, to try to make it be something workable, cost-wise, than what it has ended up to be. There are some people who are saying that it is fitting for it to be what it is. There are some who are saying it's a big overkill, but what it is. And all I can say is that this government, I don't believe, at least not with my instigation, would have done something looking like that to provide cemetery space.
Thank you, Mr. Tibbetts.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Eden had a follow-up question.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate what the minister has said.
Down cemetery.
I would have thought that in the austere time, it would have been simpler to build on the sand where they could just go straight down and come up, and instead of this elaborate cement outlay that I see there. I am reliably informed that such a nice place, people are dying to get in there.
Thank you, Mr. Eden. Mr. Bush?
Mr. Chairman, I heard about this, just to say. I think the minister made it absolutely clear when this project came into being. I do know when they were planning up until December, when we were looking for space for Bordentown. I don't know that they bought across the street. I thought it was only on the swamp side. But everyone knew, and everyone know that we are stricken with trying to house space for cemetery space for walls and so on. But certainly, me myself, when I heard about it, I thought it was something like the high school, but a smaller version, but not. I didn't think it's so much out of place. But what I want to say, it was built at a time of the interim. I don't think we'd even call it interim government, because I don't know if we had a government, except that what was said on the floor of this house, that they would govern with the help of the backbench who propelled them into governance. So I don't know how all that went on, and at least the PPM didn't know what their colleagues was doing in cabinet. What was said here in the House was that they would not move forward with anything unless they made the then opposition, majority opposition, no. So to make it absolutely clear, what is being talked about when the project started wasn't started until after. It was started between January and May. Big walls or small walls, that's when it started. That's when it started, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Bush. Are there any further questions on PAH 4? Mr. McLean, do you have a question, sir?
Yes, ma'am.
That's okay.
Yes, sir.
That's okay. That's okay.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman.
No offense taken.
God forbid I mistake you for Miss Jewel. But, Mr. Chairman, I just want to ask the minister about the couple of issues that I had made representation to cabinet on in this regard for under this department for East End, i.e. the dump dump. Sorry, I'm way off today, Mr. Chairman. The digging out of the launch ramps and the digging out of the swim areas and the cleaning of that wall behind behind the surface wall.
Yeah, but I'm talking about this.
Surface wall and the digging out of the ramp at the Heritage Field and the digging out of the swim area at Collier's by the public beach and the maintenance of the Dixon Park.
Mr. Chairman, we will get updates of that as we go along. Can we continue on? And I'm getting the information for you.
Thank you.
Before we go any further though, the Dixon Park, is that something that was being maintained by that was one of them that was being maintained by the DART group, and as I understand it, contracts had gone out, and I don't know whether all the new contracts, because I haven't been privy to them, which contracts they have awarded and who to. So I would have to get that information, because that was not one of them under recreation parks and cemeteries. So I'd have to get that information.
Mr. Chairman, I thank the Minister for that.
But the other stuff, I'll find the information out and revert to you shortly.
And I know the manager, tries his best to try to look at the park there in East End. The Dixon
Talking about
Park.
the Dixon Park.
Yes, but I think there was a transition. The previous government, I don't know how to get my opponent in it, and he was responsible for the maintenance, and it looked like it's a, what do you call it, the Serengeti, and the elephants need to trample it down.
Let's hope it ain't no wildebeests there.
Well,
But just to say, and thank you for the information through you, Mr. Chair, we will contact them, and as soon as we get a response from them, we'll let you know. Because it was not our PCU. While I understand what you're saying, that Mr. Bothwell and his team will try to look out for it, I'm not 100% sure whether there has been any shift and any one of those parks have been given back and said, government, here, you take responsibility for it. We'll find all of that out and let you know.
I don't think so, but what happened was that it's for over a year now, since the election, that, some people didn't get elected. They're no more use to anyone. So they want to take the contract from them now, you see?
I see.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Miller, you had a question, sir?
Yeah, through you to the Minister. I had specifically requested that the Gerald Smith Park in Northside be removed from under the DART maintenance contract and placed under this.
RPCU?
Yes, I'm wondering if the budgetary provision has been made for that to happen. Because the community is really dissatisfied with the way it's being maintained.
Mr. Chairman, that will be part and parcel of all of the answers that I will get as swiftly as I possibly can. I do know that that request from Mr. Miller was in writing, and I do know that it was passed on with instructions for the various issues to be acted on, so I will determine, let you know.
Thank you, Mr. Tibbetts.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr.
we don't got chief officer, right? He can't answer some of this in East that Minister, man. He not responsible, or
Mr. Chairman,
he should know all these things.
Mr. Chairman, it doesn't quite work like that. Chief officer wouldn't know everything. When I pass stuff on and he actions stuff, same thing he's going to find out. We all have to find out. But we'll get there as quickly as we can, information-wise.
Thank you. Can we defer the vote on PAH 4 until information is provided? We'll move on to PAH 5. PAH 5, Agriculture Regulatory Services for $1,615,599, found on page 131 of the annual plan and estimates. Are there any questions?
Yes, sir.
Mr. McLean, yes,
I
sir?
know the gentleman here is between you and I, so you can't see me.
Yes, sir. You can proceed to ask your question.
Okay, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to ask the minister, in this description, it is administration of programs to regulate the import and export of plants, and how this ties in with a green, already gazetted amendment to the plants law. And I had it a few minutes ago, but part of it was missing, and part of the gazetted bill is missing. About 3 or 4 clauses are not in there, but it specifically talks about the chief veterinary and agricultural officer. Is that the title?
Well, the CAVO, which is what was the former nomenclature, now the new title is Director of Agriculture, not CAVO. So that's a part of the change.
Well, who's going to take that title now? Because they're leaving it in the law.
Through you, Mr. Chair, can Mr. McLean just repeat the question?
Mr. Chairman, I'm trying to ask how it relates, because as I recall in that amendment, and I read it a few weeks ago, it was amending the law for the CAVO to consult with the National Conservation Board, Conservation Council prior to the importation, and take advice from them prior to importation.
Right. Those changes to the law and regs are to fall in line with the National Conservation Law, and really that was what was holding up the law being put into force. So that's what those changes are for. But if it's not done yet, everything that had the name CAVO in the law and or regulations and or the plants importation and exportation law will be changed, if it hasn't already been changed, from CAVO to the Director of Agriculture. I say what I say because it appears from what you're saying that something still refers to CAVO. And I'm saying if that's the case, then that change also has to be made. Okay, the reason for it, because we now have 2 sections in the Department of Agriculture. You will have the Director of Agriculture, and you will have the Chief Veterinary Officer. Prior to this, just as a matter of course, if we remember, we had Dr. Jackman first, and then Dr. Alfred Benjamin after that. Both of them were veterinary doctors. So the terminology came about when they headed up the department. It was called the Chief Agricultural and Veterinary Officer, hence CAVO. Now that no longer exists. So we're transitioning from one to the other, and the law has to follow.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, we need to withdraw this amendment then, because I know my memory wasn't that bad. At least not for 2 weeks. The plants importation and exportation law 1997 revision in this law, referred to as the principal law, is amended in section 2 by inserting after the definition of the word CAVO the following definition. So that's one spot, it's there still. And then when considering an application for a license to import a live or viable specimen or an alien or genetically altered plant, the CAVO, in accordance with any directives issued by the National Conservation Law, shall consult with that council and take into account any views of the council before granting any such license.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Chairman, all I'm saying to the minister is
there are rational
we need
answers.
change
I understand
them
that,
things.
and I appreciate that, and there are rational answers to that. And when we deal with the bill, all of that will be dealt with. Okay.
Thank you. If there are no further questions, we'll proceed to vote. Mr. Eden?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Two questions into one. Up in my area in the Lower Valley, we have these little, not little, millipede-looking things round. Seems to be an invasion. I've spoken to some of the technicians, and they're not quite sure what it is. I'm made to understand that they're so bitter that not even the birds will eat them. Then the other thing, and really I've noticed in recent times, is what I call the black lice, especially on the fig trees, and I'm also told by agriculture the birch trees, if there's anything for that, I know they're sprayed for me, but it's just incredible. The worms, I don't know, they just keep coming up, especially after the rain.
Mr. Chair, forgive me. Mr. Chair, Mr. Eden's observations are correct and perfectly in order. And where I live, as the crow flies a couple of miles away from him, I have the same observations, but they certainly extend a lot further than that. The department is well aware. I believe that the circular, tubular things that he's talking about, some type of worm, I believe, yeah, they're hard, yeah, stink too. I believe they are more seasonal than anything else, similar to the fruit flies. The black lice that he speaks to is something that the department is well aware of, and there are spraying programs that are ongoing. With limited manpower, they certainly can't get everywhere as swiftly as they possibly can, but they are meticulously going through the process as best they can. I take this opportunity, Mr. Chairman, to say that given the nature of things as they are now, because I am pretty sure that it is safe to conclude that some of these foreign mites, diseases, and other things which affect our agricultural life, while not indigenous to the Cayman Islands, have several ways by which they can be brought here, some of which we can do our best to control, but not all of which we can control. And when it happens, we just have to go to battle. Now, one of the things that we are looking at, and we have to really think seriously about that, is the resources by way of material is one thing, treating all of these things. But it's almost impossible for the department to have the human resources, the actual manpower, to be able to not just effectively, but on a very timely basis, deal with these things. So we are seeking for innovative ways to get help with the manpower, and once we can train some individuals to help with that. I think some of the larger farms that have people employed, we're going to be looking at asking them to be some self-help, while under the direction of the department, when you go to spray things that would normally take 3, 4, 5 days, depending on the size of the farm, might be able to knock it out of the way swifter if we get help from within. The other thing, which may seem a bit far-fetched, but I think it's something that needs to be looked at, is certain types of prisoners, low-risk prisoners. We might be able to be looked at getting them trained and making them be able to assist with the various herbicidal and other programs. And that is something that we're going to be looking at, Mr. Chair, just to let you know.
Thank you, Mr. Tibbetts. Are there any further questions with respect to this approach? Mr. McLean?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I just want to ask the minister if he can tell us the success rate of their artificial insemination with animals. I think they do cows and pigs, or just cows?
We also do goats, Mr. Chair. And I don't have those statistics available, but we will provide that as soon as we can. I know that they're no longer than some 2 weeks ago. There were courses going on, and there's a young Caymanian who has taken up the mantle with the AI program, and that is very encouraging. They had a course that was going on. I think that they probably had 15 or 16 participants, and from all indications, most of the farmers are encouraged, and certainly many of them are learning for themselves how to do the process effectively, and with the assistance of the department, to have their reproduction survival rates increased noticeably, which will make their businesses much more profitable.
Mr. Chairman, can the minister tell us how cost effective this program is compared with the importation of livestock?
Once the survival rate is to an acceptable level, it is definitely more cost effective. And you see, one of the difficulties with the importation is all of the quarantine time and the way the animals have to be shipped. And a lot of the farmers themselves are not in a position financially to do any meaningful level of importation of these animals because of the cost of them that size, whereas doing the AI program and being able to have them born on site and reared on site, many of them are in a much better position doing it in that way.
Thank you, Mr. Tibbetts. Mr. McLean, is there another
Thank God
question?
I don't have to make any comment on that last statement.
If there are no further questions, then let us proceed to the vote. All those in favor of PAH 5, Agriculture Regulatory Services?
Mr. Chairman, will that mean that the information will still be forthcoming, though?
Yes,
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 sir.
absolutely.
Yes, sir. All those in favor of PAH 5, Agriculture Regulatory Services for $615,599. Standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye. Aye. And those against, no. PAH 6, Agriculture Development Services, $372,812, found on page 132 of the annual plan and estimates. Are there any questions?
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Bush?
Mr. Chairman, on the relevant page 132, the number of written, as the wording goes, and figures, written responses to media inquiries, interviews, there, and the number of training and educational intervention activities coordinated and or delivered, number of educational activities and programs for the youth assisted with, and number of man-hours spent in preparation, delivery of marketing, agribusiness, promotional, technical, and so on. As you see there, the vote for 2014 on the first one is 6 responses. Budget this year is 6 to 8, and 27 on the next one, and this year is down 10 to 12. Number of man-hours spent in preparation is 500 to 1,000 versus 600 last year, and number of man-hours spent administering is 400 to 500 versus 415. And the budget has decreased, yet most of this is the work has increased. I'm trying to understand what
I understand
differences
exactly
are.
what you're saying, and I'm not being cute with my answer, but the truth of the matter is that we are learning to do more with less.
Thank you.
And that's simply the truth.
And that's the way it should be.
I know that. And as you live through things, Mr. Chair, and experience is gained by this department and other departments, they will find more innovative and effective ways to achieve the same outcomes, at the same time being very cost conscious, and wherever anything can be saved, it is saved. And this is simply just a case in hand. While I'm at it, Mr. Chair, if I may, for the benefit of the member from East End and other members, with regards to the success rate of the AI program. In 2012, there were, I call them in my layman terms, 65 implants. There were 35 successful results. In 2013, there was 45 with a 56% success rate confirmed. This figure may well increase because what some farmers are doing, if I may call it as a backup plan, some of them place, for instance, the cows with bulls after artificial insemination takes place. So the animals are pregnant, but until they calf and the calf-based data will know whether it was the artificial insemination or the bull. No.
Thank you, sir.
So a little bit later on, we'd probably have a better idea.
Thank
But
you.
in other words, it can't be any worse than 56%. It can only get better.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Tibbetts. All right. Any further questions? Mr. Miller?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to the Minister. Some years ago, there was some report in the press about involving the Israelis in giving some advice and training to local farmers. Has anything been done about that recently, or is it just petter out and nothing happened?
Mr. Chairman, nothing has been done about it recently. A few years back, attempts were made, but we did not, we meaning the department nor the ministry at the time, did not receive good or encouraging feedback, and it was, to be truthful, almost like the contacts that were established really weren't interested. It's like we were eons away and foreign and that kind of stuff. So I know that there has been some pressure put to bear for those who believe because Israelis are so successful in certain levels in agriculture, given the fact that they live in a desert, that they would be very helpful in this climate, and I would not doubt that that's possible. It's just that logistically, it's not as simple as some may think to achieve the connection.
Thank you, Mr.
Mr.
Tibbetts.
Chairman.
Mr. Bush.
Mr. Chairman, the question I asked earlier, the minister says learning to do more with less. That's a good objective. But how are they doing so? I note that number of educational activities and programs for the youth assisted has gone up, where it was non-existent. The number of man hours spent in preparation, delivery of marketing, agribusiness, promotional, technical, administrative, and logistical services to support the development of the sector and improve and enhance national food security from 600 to 500 to 1,000. So that's quite a bit of a percentage.
Mr. Chair, just to quickly say to you, the 2013-14 forecast is just that, a forecast.
But all the budget is just that forecast.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is we're nearing the end of the 13-14 budget cycle, so we have a much better idea of exactly how much it's going to be. So when you see the next budget come around and you have the 14-15 forecast looking to the 15-16 budget, it might be somewhere in the region of 550 or 650 is all I'm saying. It isn't that initially 600 was what was planned to be done, and the 500 to 1,000 is simply giving a window.
You might not meet your objective of the 600 that you had budgeted for or forecasted for 2013.
No, this is what I'm telling you now. The 600 is more of an accurate forecast than what was done at the very beginning. At the very beginning, you probably had 500 to 1,000 in the budget. Now it's forecast because you're nearing the budget cycle.
The budget of 2013-14?
Right, exactly. That's what I'm saying.
Are you sure?
I can verify that.
On that one,
I'll verify it.
Yeah, that one, please.
In other words,
But
yeah, I'm told by the CFO that just like we're doing now for the 14-15 budget, when the 13-14 budget was being prepared, you would have seen the range, which is like in here 500 to 1,000. The reason why the forecast is just that is because nearly, 11 months into the year and knowing what has been done thus far, there's a pretty good calculation of exactly how close you'll get. And 600 is the magic number, not 1,000.
So you say you're getting this work done, it's up to $50,000 less.
Right.
Getting 40,
Yes.
and that's how you expect to get this work done.
Yes, sir.
All right.
Thank you. If there are no more questions, Mr. McLean, you have a question?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I have two questions, and I can ask both of them to the minister at the same time, see if he'll answer them together. Some time ago, there was a controversy surrounding farmers' cards, and I don't know if that has been resolved, but I have had representation about the lack thereof to get to identify themselves when they go to customs to get their import, their duty exemption when they do their imports as a farmer, you know. And secondly, I notice Minister has more than any other minister in the past in this country has fought and believed in agriculture long before I did. He was convinced that agriculture was one of the key initiatives that we should pursue in this country to make it self-sustaining. Now, I noticed that the Minister for Youth has billboards up about the successes of our youth and their academic success. Throughout the world that I have been, and in particular those countries that I've been to where agriculture is a mainstay, and they focus on it heavily, especially through the Caribbean. They have big billboards up with farmers, with statements like, advertising statements like, eat locally grown produce, and they're all throughout the countries, Jamaica, St. Kitts, name it, they all have them up. I have been wondering, I've been asking when we're going to do that, because I believe the time has come that the same emphasis that the current minister has put on this thing needs to be enhanced to try to produce more locally and enhance our economy from that perspective and say, send it Florida, get tomatoes, we'll spend it here. And so I'm wondering if the minister can tell us if we have any intention of doing that. The Minister for Youth does it. And now it's time that agriculture does it as well.
Thank you, Mr. McLean. Mr. Miller.
First of all,
Mr. Tibbetts, sorry.
it's okay. I've been called worse. Sorry? No. I just simply told the truth. I said I've been called worse. Mr. Chairman. Yes. Mr. Chairman, I let the Director of Agriculture answer the first part of the question with regards to the IDs, and then I will answer the second part of the question.
Thank you.
Name.
Mr. Estwick, just please give us your full name and title before you answer the question.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Adrian Estwick, Director of Agriculture, Ministry of Planning, Lands, Agriculture, Housing and Infrastructure. To answer the first part of the question, yes, we have started to issue the ID cards. We started not last week, the week before last, and our first set of 40 cards have been issued, and we are going to continue with the issuance in troves. So that is that has started, sir. The intention is that by September we would have gotten through all the issuance of the cards in the current cycle. And then yes, sir, we'll have it under control.
Thank you, Mr. Estwick.
Mr. Chair, the second part of the question is a very valid observation on the part of the member. And let me tell you, and if I am guilty, then that's fine, one of the impediments that we've had is for agriculture, it has always been difficult with the limited resources allocated for the agricultural sector to justify, in my mind, spending money on advertising when it is so sorely needed in the field in other areas. But having said that, I recognize the value of the exposure and also the impetus that it can be to the farming sector itself. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be approaching private sector who purchase from our farmers and try to create a marriage which will give the farmers exposure, give those businesses at the same time also some exposure that they are supporting local agriculture, and at the same time look to entice the discerning consumer to the table to purchase more of these products. That way, it's a win-win all around. So that's going to be an attempt that we're going to make, and I believe that it can be a successful one. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tibbetts. Are there any further questions? All those in favor of PAH 6, Agriculture Development Services, $372,812. Standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, no. PAH 8, Management of Special Projects, $963,572, found on page 133 of the Annual Plan and Estimates, page 133. Are there any questions? Mr. Bush?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, could the minister just give me an idea of what these special projects are? I see that the number of drawing or plans produced, they said was forecast 30 to 40, and the budgeting for the same amount virtually in this budget as they did in the coming budget, as they did the present budget. And the sum has been reduced by 50-odd thousand.
While they confer, just to mention that we will be working until 7 p.m. this evening, but we will be taking a mid-break sometime in the afternoon before that. But we will be here until 7 p.m.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, the $50-odd thousand again is simply a cost-saving initiative on our part. Members will recall or perhaps be reminded of the fact that our operational budget this year had to be some $12 million less than this year, meaning for 14-15, had to be some $12 million less by way of the FFR than the operational budget for 13-14. So everybody, and certainly my ministry and departments were not excluded, had to look to be able to see how much we could preserve the integrity of the services that we provided and be able to do so and still find savings in this regard. And we were part and parcel of it. And if I am allowed to say so, I want to congratulate all of those involved in my ministry for being so willing to look to see what could be accomplished. Mr. Chairman, some of the projects, just to name some, are the Red Bay Primary School infant block fit out, Red Bay Primary School classroom addition, Northside Primary School assembly fit out, Northside Primary School assembly fit out, Northside Primary School classroom addition. Sorry? Mr. Chair, this is for the 14-15 budget coming up. John Gray High School, expand the automotive workshop, passport office renovations, Northwood Prison new admin building, Northwood Prison perimeter fence improvements, Airport Fire Station AC system replacement, customs X-ray scanning facility, and there are more and more, and some other ones.
Mr. Miller?
Through you, Mr. Chair, and just from my edification, this kind of architectural and project management, which I assume we won't let the architectural, they have proceeded without consultation with the teachers and our parents in the Northside Primary School to design a classroom?
No.
No.
Mr. Chairman, these are suggested projects. Nothing has been done to anything yet. It's for the 14-15 budget, but these are requests for the Public Works Department from the various agencies, ministries, and otherwise, and allocations have to be made in order for them to be able to do this. The proper procedure will follow with all of them.
Thank you, Mr. Tibbetts.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, there seems to be an omission because the request, as I know, was not for one classroom for Northside, it was 2 classrooms and a staff room for the teachers.
Mr. Chairman, it says Northside Primary School class CLASSRM addition. That's not being specific as to exactly what is entailed.
Thank you. Mr. McTaggart, you had a question?
Just a point of clarification, Mr. Chairman. On the schedule that I think you were reading from, you showed and read out PAH 8 as $963,572. And on page 133, we show it as $828,572. I believe that there's a difference of about $135,000.
Good point, Mr. McTaggart, good point. There appears to be, that figure on this schedule, we'll consider that in a minute and come back.
Just wondered which was the correct one.
Yeah, thank you. That's a very good observation.
Sure.
Thank you.
Which one is the 828? Mr. Chairman, I can tell you that the 828 is the correct figure.
Thank you, Mr. Tibbetts.
Whatever cosmetics you all have to do, but 828 is the correct figure.
Okay, we'll correct that in the schedule, and we will proceed on the basis of $828,572. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Miller. Mr. McLean? Mr. McLean, yes, sir.
yeah, Mr. Chairman, I wonder if the minister can tell us when they got to do some drawings to change that monstrosity that takes 2 weeks to put up in front of the Legislative Assembly.
But before you answer that question, just to clarify that, yes, the correct figure is the $828,572. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
They can make, Mr. Minister, they can make that out of aluminum stock now that you don't have to paint them.
Mr. Chairman, as I understand from staff, we do now have a new plan, and we'll see what can happen next year.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I really thank the minister because that, you know, they look like one of the National Bugle ship. About 9,000 coats of paint on it.
Thank you. if we could proceed to the vote if there are no further questions on PAH 8. So all those in favor of PAH 8, management of special projects for $828,572. Standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, no. PAH 9, management of land information, $2,942,404. Are there any questions? Mr. Miller?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, to the minister or his technical people. In the management of this land information, how is it possible that land can be gazetted as a road in 1982, but lands and survey is still not plotted the road on their maps and is transferring ownership of land, which I believe was under the gazettal process in 1982, became government land when the Gazette notice was issued. But even today, they are still transferring ownership to private people. Has it been de-gazetted and I don't know nothing about it? Huh? I'd like.
Mr. Chairman, we have the person in charge of lands and survey who is here with us, and I believe he is perhaps best qualified to answer the question. So if Mr. Miller doesn't mind, just to ensure that there is full understanding, if you could just go over it again, and I would ask him to respond.
There's a section of what used to be the Queens Highway, which is now Old Robin Road, I believe, that was gazetted for as a public road in 1982 on the basis of a petition handed into government for landowners, because traditionally the land is sea to cliff and cliff to swamp. So you had about 5 or 6, maybe 7 landowners who had no access to their land. And on a petition presented to government, the road was gazetted so that it followed the boundary of the cliff, allowing these individual landowners to have access. For some reason, it doesn't seem that that was ever plotted on any map in lands and survey. So even today, those people are being told they don't have any access, because when they built the Old Robin Road, the Queens Highway, in a hurry for the Queen was coming, they did not follow the gazetted path. They followed the original 6-foot thing that was there. And some of the landowners are having some difficulty because only one parcel of it is actually registered in land register as public open space between the road and the landowner who doesn't have right of way. So that person has a right of way over there. The other landowners have no access, and some of them are being harassed by the landowners. I just want to know what's the legal position, if there is one.
Is the microphone on?
I could repeat that.
Yes, sir.
Rupert Vasquez, Lands and Survey, Director.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I'm uncertain under which section of the road, of the roads law, that road is gazetted. It could be under Section 3, which is a proposal, or a Section 5, which is a land take.
Mr. Chairman, I'm fairly confident it was Section 5. At that time, I don't believe they had a Section 3 back in 1982.
If it was a Section 5 at that time, it would have read an intention or a proposal, which now is the current Section 3. And that may be the problem there, because it is just then a proposal and not a land take. So that could be the reason for the inaction at that time. If we need to move it forward, then we need to gazette it under Section 5, which is a take, and then we could move on to make it public. That would be the solution I would recommend.
Well, we've been trying to get this.
If I may, and thank you for allowing me the intervention. Not being familiar with what the specifics are, but thinking of what you're talking about, it seems to me like this is something that once we can get the details of, track down all the information, then whatever action needs to be taken, we will, and I give that commitment.
I thank you, sir, because I've been providing the information on a regular basis for the last 5-6 years, and nobody I gave it to your chief officer last year. I told him about it right down here. And I have gone to the minister before him, and the chief officer before him, and the minister before him, and the chief officer before him. And nobody seems to know what to do. Now that we have been told what to do, I welcome the commitment from you, Mr. Minister, to move it forward, and I will supply whatever details that I have that is available. Because it's not a large section of land. Some of it is even 10, 15 feet wide to sort it out.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Are there any further questions? Mr. Bush, you have a question?
Yes. Through you, Mr. Chairman. Are you the chief surveyor as well?
Yes.
So, Mr. Chairman, one individual holds Director of Lands and Survey, Chief Surveyor, and at one time Land Registrar. Hence my question. What plans are in place, to the Chief Officer I should say, what plans are in place to address and ensure succession planning within your ministry? i.e., what specific training and skills are required? Why can't Caymanians be found to do these jobs? And I was specific, Mr. Chairman, go after the Chief Surveyor's post, where we have 2 Caymanians more than qualified. And in fact, when in 2007, according to my information, when people applied, the individual who ended up getting the job was actually given 3 months to get a qualification that was already held by 2 of the other Caymanian applicants. So this, first you have one individual holding 3 posts, of which 2 contradict each other, because they're supposed to be checks and balances, and now you're back to this. Can you please, and they're giving jobs to people who are about to retire, and Caymanians are applying. What's in place for Caymanians to apply for these jobs, or those who are in there can be trained for these jobs? Please.
Mr. Jones.
Mr. Chairman, through you, there's an awful lot in Mr. Bush's sort of question. I'll try and hit the majority of the points. No doubt the member can come back to me if I omit anything. Just for a point of clarity, the present director and chief surveyor is a Caymanian. Moving on from that, the chief surveyor post has been advertised and a shortlist has been prepared. Interviews will be undertaken with, I believe, the two shortlisted candidates over the next 2 or 3 weeks. I can inform the House that both those shortlisted candidates are Caymanian. In relation to the general point about succession planning, I think that probably goes across not only Lands and Survey and my ministry, but across all of government. And I'm sure the Deputy Governor would have something to say on that topic. But from my own perspective, I can confirm that per the Deputy Governor's directive, all of the departments within my ministry have prepared succession plans, and meetings were held with the relevant head of departments approximately 3 or 4 weeks ago to run through those succession plans, to draw up priorities, agree those priorities, and to discuss what we're going to be doing going forward in relation to certain key posts. Forgive me, I can't quite remember any of the other points that Mr. Bush made, so maybe if you could come back to me, sir.
Mr. Chairman. Yes, you are right. I did know that the individual who was holding 3 posts is a Caymanian. Thank the Lord for that, much at least. For one individual to hold 3 spots is only Peter God. I know is better than that. But
Mr. Bush.
yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So once again, if any further questions, we will have to go to the Deputy Governor. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. Mr. McLean and then Mr. Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to ask, through you, when was that job for the Chief Surveyor advertised?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I'll seek clarification on when the adverts actually took place, but I can confirm that the deadline date for receipt of applications was April 25th. But I can seek the clarification in terms of the actual dates if you require that.
No, if the deadline for application was April,
April 25th, sir.
then it had to be prior to that, the advertisement. So that gives me a fair understanding of where it was, probably a few weeks prior to that the advertisement was done. But it's interesting that we have that close date for applications. So that's April what was it we said?
April 25th, sir.
25th, May, June. 1.5 months. 1.5 months since the close date. Does it take that long for government to hire people after they have shortlisted them to like 2? And if they came on, you ain't gonna have do no teleconference in this time. They write down somewhere.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, it is intended that the interviews will take place immediately after Finance Committee. You'll appreciate it takes 2 or 3 weeks to sort through the applications and prepare the appropriate matrix, and then obviously we have to factor in those people who are on leave who would likely be on the interview panel. It was felt that it was best to leave it until after Finance Committee because of the uncertainty as to when Finance Committee would actually meet.
Must be because, I mean, I appreciate that. Mr. Chairman, can I go on and answer the questions?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, now that we're on the personnel aspect of this, during the last Finance Committee in October, we kicked up our heels in here about a particular position, the Registrar of Lands. And we were assured that the person who was being put in place, even though we didn't like the recruitment process, nor the shortlisting, we were assured that that position, that appointment was for 2 years. So since October, that's 6 months, 7 months, thereabout, 7, 8 months. We were further assured that someone would be identified shortly to take over that position by going to law school to at least get a degree, not necessarily get called to the bar. Can we get an update, please?
Mr. Chairman, if it pleases you, I'd perhaps ask the Director of Lands and Survey just to provide an update on that. I can obviously fill in any gaps thereafter that the member requires.
Mr. Chairman, we had identified one person, one senior person in the land registry, and we were working with her throughout. She had agreed to take on the opportunity and the challenge to go to law school. And up until, I would think in May, she advised that she had revisited her commitment and her ability to follow through with it. And due to personal reasons, she believed that she couldn't take it on at this time. I met with her, the registrar met with her, and we tried to convince her. The senior land registry advisor also met with her to try to convince her to take it on, but she again considered and said that she couldn't due to personal reasons. We then went down to the other senior officers within land registry, and they felt that they couldn't take it on for different reasons. So we are at a crossroad right now where we have to look further afield for recruitment within Lands and Survey and for young Caymanians within there, which may not be the most senior officer.
Just for the sake of clarification, just to make sure I understand what you're saying.
Just within Lands and Survey.
So eventually,
Outside of land registry, and perhaps to seek other offices within Lands and Survey that may be in the survey section or other sections.
I think the question pertains to the Registrar of Lands. So for someone to eventually qualify to become the Registrar of Lands?
Yes, to take up, to get a degree to qualify for the Registrar of Lands.
So are you saying then that someone who already holds a degree that is not inside the Registrar of Lands would be unable to apply for it?
Well, it's a law degree that we are going for.
Yeah, sure.
Yes.
Someone else who already has a law degree would be precluded from applying if they're not currently employed in Lands and Survey?
Well, we tried to recruit within Lands and Survey.
But you didn't do that in this case?
Well, we didn't have time.
So
Yeah.
therefore you'll have time in future?
Yes.
Okay.
To try to recruit within Lands and Survey and somebody that has been serving with us. I think it's only fair to give staff the opportunity within Lands and Survey.
We'll leave it for another day, but...
No, Mr. Chairman, we're not leaving that one for another day.
No, Mr. Chairman.
No, we're not.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, who acted in that post before? Who held the post before? Did they have law degrees, or has this law degree then put in there to make the bar too high or difficult?
I think the question is who acted there and who had a law degree. If they had a law degree at the time of acting prior to the post being filled.
No.
Mr. Chairman, I thank you for your intervention, sir, because I was going at that same thing, but in a little different way. No, let me do it in a little different way. Mr. Vasquez, that's what your name is, sir?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Okay. Says that they went to the person. We can lead the horse to the water. We can't force them to drink. And then you went lower down to the next one down the ranks, and they're not interested.
To the next tier. Yeah.
To the next tier, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Now, what it appears like that we are looking for is a law degree. That seems to be the operative profession or licensed professional that we need. We got enough of them. Trust me. There's 1 million Caymanians. The carcasses are littering the sidewalk in Cayman. Can't get a job. Would you please now proceed to advertise it, asking for a law degree to be trained as, what name? Registrar. That's question number one. Then why should, thinking about that, sir, you like me, reaching that magical age of sailing away in the sunset, plenty of wind on our back, and smooth sailing. What we doing about your position? That's the question. That's the second question. You can answer them too, and then we come in.
Well, through you, Mr. Chair, the first question, I really don't have a problem in advertising the post at all, and to try to recruit for someone to take up the challenge for a law degree. In terms of the second question, perhaps the chief officer could speak to that. Well, we're not. Yes. Yes.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Jones can go ahead if he wants. Go ahead, no problem.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I think in truth it probably involves both of us, the chief officer and the director, but I would be the first to admit that it's a challenge. Mr. Vasquez and myself have had several discussions over the last year or two to try and identify a viable succession plan for the director. Obviously, things were changed somewhat from the original plan when I moved up from the Director of Lands and Survey to Chief Officer, and obviously that wasn't legislated for, if you like, as part of the succession plan at that time. So we've had to bring things forward somewhat. Ignoring for one moment the possibility that the mandatory retirement age within government may change in the near future, and that Mr. Vasquez himself may well take advantage of that extension, meaning that he would have several years future employment as a director in front of him. Even allowing for that, obviously we need to make provisions for those persons who are likely to come through and challenge for that post in the future. As I say, we have had succession plan meetings with all of the HODs, including Mr. Vasquez. The post of director was discussed. We accepted there were challenges. There are some options in the department at the moment, but they will require some work in terms of training and mentoring. There are also some unknowns in relation to one or two people within Lands and Survey Department who have permanent residence now, and by the time that the post might become vacant, would actually be quote-unquote Caymanians.
Mr. Chairman, and this may seem like a stupid question, but I would like, if I could find out, both of these two gentlemen, Mr. Jones and Mr. Vasquez, Mr. Jones was a former director. I wonder if Mr. Jones can explain their progression, his progression from whence he came to become a director, and explain Mr. Vasquez for us as well, please.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, just for clarity, so you mean in terms of what posts I held, or
yes,
what qualifications I got? Or?
No, not qualifications. I want the post you held, prior to becoming a director?
Well, I'll certainly deal with myself. It might be easier if Mr. Vasquez actually deals
That's
with
fine, that's
himself, sir. But I came here in 1989 as an assistant lands officer. That was when we had a two-person, what you might call valuation office. It wasn't called the valuations office, and it was called lands section. I came as assistant lands officer. When I came, I was a member of the RICS, the Royal Institution of Chartered Surveyors, and I had a degree in estate and property management. Several years in that post, took over as what was then the Chief Valuation Officer. It was previously the Lands Officer, so it was a promotion for me.
Mm-hmm.
So I was heading the Valuation and Estates Office at that time. Several years in that post, before I was promoted to Director of Lands and Survey. At the time of Mr. Buchanan, the previous Director and Registrar, leaving the island. That was in 2004, and then obviously promoted to position of Chief Officer end of 2011. Is that?
I don't need Chief Officer.
Okay.
I just need up to Director Lands and Survey.
All right, sir.
And Mr. Vasquez, could you enlighten us, please?
Yes, well, I came here in 1982 and then eventually moved up to Quality Control Officer. I was a technical assistant, survey technical assistant, he was called at that time. And then I moved up from there to Chief Surveyor in 2007, I believe. And then I believe I was appointed shortly to Deputy Director, I believe, to hold and Registrar of Lands. And I was to hold the post of Chief Surveyor for a time in an acting capacity. And I then moved on to Director, and with both posts, and then the post of Registrar was advertised and filled, and then I as Chief Surveyor and Director, but only acting as Chief Surveyor.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, and I applaud both of you for whatever that succession plan was. We just discussed a surveyor, a chief surveyor, and we are down to 2 Caymanians. One of them got to get it. Okay? So, each of you held that position and then went to director. You didn't have that, wasn't you? He did, though.
Yes, sir, I didn't. Mr. Vasquez did.
Yeah, he did. And it was accepted that that was his progression to a director from there. Now, we're not going to worry about him retiring.
Mr. McLean, could you just be specific? He didn't have what? The law
He
degree?
didn't. He went from chief surveyor to director, acting, whatever the case may be, in whole nother spots, but overall, the director, I think, right? So now that we're hiring a chief surveyor, we don't have to be concerned about succession plans for him, for the director now, because the chief surveyor, who will be a Caymanian, will go right into that position as director after a while. Is that fair to assume? I don't understand how difficult it's going to be, because Mr. June just explained that he has sat down with everybody, deputy governor and everybody, and they're picking their hairs out, trying to figure out how to find a director. But it's easy. We have already gone through that same process over the last few years, right up through the ranks. So we don't got to worry about that one. We got that one covered. We just need, and we got the other one covered. The registrar, because we got plenty of young lawyers out there that we can train. If it's a law degree we're looking. So I don't think we need to discuss this subject any longer in the future. In the future. Except to find out how those two Caymanians are progressing. One, the chief surveyor, and two, the one we got pick up that has been thrown to the curb as a lawyer in this country. Is that fair to say that that is a reasonable assessment of what the future is going to present to us here for those, at least those two positions?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, one thing I would say by way of clarity, obviously it's not written in stone that the Chief Surveyor becomes the Director of Lands and Survey. It could come from any of the other sections within the department. The other thing I would say is that we would certainly hope that that would turn out to be the case. However, you will appreciate, sir, I can't preempt what would be an open recruitment exercise at the time in terms of the recruitment to the Director of Lands and Survey post. And there would obviously be advertisements, interviews, a panel, a decision. So I wouldn't wish to preempt that decision, but I would agree with you in principle. It's something that we could hope for, yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, I totally support Mr. Jones' view. There are no guarantees we're not going to get in October when we go out in the street here. Life is like that. But at the very least, we got a plan in action. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McLean. Mr. Miller, you had a question, and then after you, Mr. Bush.
Through you, is it likely that the next person who wants to move from chief surveyor to a director will also need a law degree?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, there is not a requirement that the Director of Lands and Survey have a law degree. That is only for the Registrar of Lands post.
So, to get back to my original question, is it likely to be a shifting of the goalposts as before, that a requirement will now be to move from chief surveyor to director of lands and survey? The person will need more qualifications than the regular RSIC or CIS, whatever it is?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, it's RICS. Just for clarity, the Director of Lands and Survey post requires and has always required, as far as I can recall, a degree and membership of RICS. So in that regard, nothing would change. The Chief Surveyor, and maybe the acting Chief Surveyor could confirm this, but I believe the requirements for the Chief Surveyor post are the same, RICS and a degree, but not a law degree. The only law degree that's required specifically within the department relates to the specific nature of the Registrar of Lands job and that particular post. So in answer to your question, sir, there will be a status quo. Things will stay as they are, as they have always been in relation to the Director of Lands and Survey post and the Chief Surveyor post.
Mr. Bush?
Does the present Register of Lands have a law degree? The present Register of Lands, does she have a law degree?
She does, yes, sir.
Beautiful. How many posts in Lands and Survey require law degrees?
One substantive post at the moment, sir.
In Lands and Survey?
In Lands and Survey, yes.
And which post is that, may I ask?
Sorry, which post?
Which post?
The Registrar of Lands.
Okay, no, that's not Lands. That's okay. Geographic Information Systems. Is it any truth that most of the posts in this section, in Lands and Survey, if you want to put all them together, are advertised both locally and overseas, but the post of Geographical Information Systems Manager has only been advertised locally?
Sorry, sir. Mr.
Most of your posts in your ministry, your department, have been advertised both locally and overseas, with the exception of the Geographic Information Systems Manager's post. That's only been advertised locally. Is this true or false?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I think the Director of Lands and Survey is probably better positioned to answer that question. I'm not the Director of Lands and Survey.
Mr. Bush, are you saying there's a downside to it being advertised locally?
No. We'll get to that in a second, Mr. Chair, sir.
Mr.
That's the upside, actually. Thank the Lord for that.
Mr. Vasquez?
Through you, Mr. Chair. The Chief Surveyor's post was also advertised only locally with a view to attract Caymanians only. The GIS Manager's post was a renewal of contract, and we were advised to advertise locally for renewal with a view again to recruit any Caymanians that may qualify, and we did so.
Thank you. Mr. Bush?
So we now have a Caymanian lined up for that GIS spot.
As part of the succession plan, we have identified a fairly senior officer, and she has expressed an opinion to be part of the succession plan. So to this date, she has been exposed to management meetings and being groomed for succession to the GIS manager's position eventually. She doesn't have a degree yet, and right now that post requires a degree.
In what, may I ask, sir?
In GIS and in computer science, as far as I could recall.
Just for the sake of clarity, his question was whether or not it was a Caymanian. You only spoke of a senior officer.
It was a Caymanian identified.
Okay. Just for the sake of clarity.
Yes.
And
I could get the details if you wish.
And Mr. Chairman,
yes.
just to help the chief officer answer Mr. McLean's answer, that chief surveyor's post was advertised August 23rd, 2011. Then it was advertised April the 7th, 2014 at 11:08 a.m.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Bush.
April the 7th. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. One final question from me. I just want to make sure I understood clearly. The current Registrar of Lands was granted a 2-year contract?
That is correct, Mr. Chairman.
That would have been last year, October, roughly, sometime around then?
Yes, December, October, somewhere there.
Okay. And when that contract expires in the next 14, 15 months, 16 months, is it possible that a Caymanian not employed within Lands and Survey but who has a law degree could apply for that job? Or is it someone has to be recruited from within Lands and Survey?
It doesn't necessarily have to be within Lands and Survey, but that is part of the recruitment exercise.
Okay.
So I couldn't answer that question directly.
Fair enough. But it's open to any Caymanian with a law degree to apply.
That is what we'd want to do, to have a Caymanian sitting in that post.
Right. Just want to make that clear.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Are there any further? Mr. Miller?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chairman. I wonder if any consideration would be given by the chief officer and the chief surveyor to hire all 2 of the Caymanians that have been shortlisted, with a clear understanding that the most qualified and the most suitable of those would be recruited now and maybe sent off for some administrative courses or something to specifically be groomed to be the chief officer in the department, with the chief surveyor being the one who's not the most qualified out of the 2. Since both are qualified because they're shortlisted, they must be qualified for the job.
There is that possibility, but again, it's an open recruitment, and whoever fills the post of chief surveyor certainly will be groomed and given management training. And so to say if we could employ both, we don't have the funds for that. I'm not sure that is possible. I think the minister and chief officer would speak to that.
Mr. Chairman, 2 of them right there. You got them right here, because I will come in at you. Yes, sir, you. Can you commit now that whomever is hired as chief surveyor whether it's two, if you can hire both of them in there, but even if it's the one, well, the commitment needs to come from both of you to hire the two of those gentlemen that have been shortlisted for whatever positions within there. Because you understand, Mr. Chairman, that this lands and survey is an extremely important part of the development of this country. That's why we are so concerned about it. That's why we ask so many questions. Our future hinges on lands and survey. And from cadastral in 1977. Can we get some commitment from the chief officer? Because I know your ministry has a checkered history when it comes to training Caymanians. Okay?
Thank you, Mr. McLean.
Can we get that commitment from both of you?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I can't commit, sir, no to hiring both of the individuals. We're advertising for a chief surveyor post. We are in a time when we're trying to keep costs down, reduce the size of the civil service. Both of the individuals who have applied, I do know personally and have known for many years. I don't wish to get into the specifics of that, but what I will say is that, you know, they are both at a stage in their career where they'll be looking for a senior post, and we only have the one. I would like to pick up on one thing, though, that two things, actually, if I may. Firstly, I would wholeheartedly agree with the members' views about lands and survey and the views that the role that it plays in the infrastructure for this country. I said it last year in Finance Committee, and I reiterate those comments now, and that is why, on this side, I mean, within the civil service, we are so careful to ensure that we uphold standards and we don't drop those standards. And in some ways, trying to uphold those standards is what's causing some of the issues in terms of setting the bar, if you like, in terms of qualifications. I'd finally like to say that I can't speak to my ministry before I was chief officer, but since I've been chief officer, training of Caymanians and putting in place a valid succession plan has been a top priority, as has been verified by the recent meetings to discuss those very succession plans, and ensuring that our training budget this year, despite a reducing budget, has in fact increased.
Mr. Chairman, I'm now going into the millionaire question. But I can say, and mind you, the chief officer might know, but Mr. Chairman, I got written down here and written on the line about 10 times. Are there any other staff members within the ministry? And when I say ministry, all your attending departments that are Caymanians, that are begging you or anybody in your ministry to help them with their education, to advance themselves and their families. Now, what I never asked about my family. Keep that in your mind. Ask about anybody in your ministry. And I said it slow, because I know you may have a tendency to misunderstand me with the old Eastern accent. Did you understand what I say, sir? Because make sure the millionaire question is part of it. Make it your final answer, sir.
Mr. Jones, did you understand his question, or did you need to restate it more concisely?
To be honest, through you, Mr. Chairman, 100%, I can't actually say I completely understood the question. Was the member asking whether I knew of any other situations where people within my ministry have asked for education support?
You or any of the people you have in charge, whether it's in the departments or in the ministry, anybody in charge in your ministry, including yourself, has had any representation from staff asking for support to finish education, go to school, and the ministry has responded positively. You just said so, that your priority has been
Mr. McLean,
to assist.
the more you elaborate, I think the less chance he has of understanding. Mr. Jones,
Through you, sir, I'll try and answer the question, and maybe the member can come back to me if he feels I'm fudging it or something. No, sir. The head of departments can deal with requests for assistance and do every day of the year in all of the departments, and I wouldn't know of every single one of those. The departments are delegated certain authority to deal with those sort of matters, and ministry will and has always encouraged them to take those applications seriously and deal with them as fairly as they can, having regard to it's a case-by-case approach in many cases, and to the fact that obviously budgets are constrained and we can't meet every requirement of every staff member every time. But wherever possible, we try and support. One thing I will say is because of the reduction in the budgets, and I'll reiterate my earlier comment that by way of example, although we have been struggling to meet our budget targets, our training budget across ministry has actually increased this year over last year, and that was not done without any pain. We had to make some hard decisions, but we prioritized training for these particular reasons. There have been occasions when applications have been granted in full, others in part. Sometimes applications have to be refused, both by the HOD or by myself for various reasons. It's very hard to answer every situation, every application, sir, because there are just so many. But I know of cases where we have fully supported, where we've part supported, and whatever. The only thing I would say is that we try and be fair and reasonable given the circumstances, but those circumstances do vary from every application. The last thing I would say is that, going back to my comment about succession plans and those that have been developed with the department and the head of departments, we can't meet every requirement at the same time. We have to prioritize, and for that reason we've gone through the succession plans with each head of department and identified certain key posts which we feel that we have to spend or give special attention to, be it both from a mentoring perspective or from the provision of training funds. I hope that gives you
Mr. Chairman, that gives me a broad understanding of the direction. But you do have something in the civil service, and I guess it would apply to you. Something called hardship allowance when people are doing their education. And if they maintain a certain GPA average, you will try to assist them as much as possible to prevent that hardship on them, right? Now, I remember going to the DG about a person. Okay? I don't know what has happened about that. I know there are people within your global ministry that has gone to training, taken classes with the understanding that they would be reimbursed, and they are not reimbursed. So maybe if you don't know of the instances, you would take it upon thy good self to investigate and see how you can make good on the promises that government has made to some of these young Caymanians to enhance their lives, particularly those within your global ministry. You might not know about it, I will give you the benefit of the doubt. Not next finance committee though, because by then you would have remembered 1 year later. So I beg of you to do that, sir.
Thank you, Mr. McLean. We have spent quite a bit of time on this particular appropriation, so I will allow.
One last.
Okay.
I got one person out here, small one.
Mr. Miller, Mr. Bush has one final question. Mr. Bush, make it as quick as possible.
Thank you. I asked a question just now of the chief officer, and he said the only position that needed a law degree was the Register of Lands. Correct?
In the Department of Land and
Yes.
Survey, I believe so, yes.
Substantive position.
Okay, beautiful. Only position, thank you. No one's previously held it before until the present holder. Now I know that a deputy post is also being sought. Will that person require a law degree as well?
Yes. Because that deputy registrar post is seen as a natural succession to the registrar of lands, a natural movement to the registrar of lands.
Okay.
So they would be equipped already to, with a short time working alongside the registrar to move into that post.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, and I must say that I agree with the member from East End about the checkered past of this department and their succession and their way people have been promoted. Thank you very much.
You did say that was being current. The recruitment process is ongoing for that post.
It's not being funded.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Mr. Miller.
Yes, sir. Who is responsible? Is the chief surveyor for checking surveys as to accuracy before they can be submitted, for instance, to planning?
Yes, sir.
What happens when a survey is accepted by the chief surveyor that turns out to be obviously wrong? What is the process to correct it, particularly in a case where somebody has obtained planning permission on that erroneous survey?
The chief surveyor can revoke the survey and can also penalize the licensed land surveyor, who is licensed by the Land Surveyors Board.
And what is the process to apply for that revocation, and how, if you revocate the survey, for instance, the survey on a high water mark, does that also negate the planning permission that was obtained on that erroneous survey?
I can only speak to the survey itself, which is the mean high water mark is the legal extent of the parcel itself. And if that is reported to the chief surveyor and investigated and found to be true, the allegations that is, then the survey can be revoked and the licensed land surveyor can be brought up in front of the Land Surveyors Board.
What is the process for someone to go about getting that revocation?
Well, they would have to notify the chief surveyor in writing, I would assume. And then the chief surveyor could do an investigation into that allegation. And then, if it is found to be true, then actions can be taken, firstly, to revoke the survey itself, and secondly, to bring the licensed land surveyor in front of the board itself.
If somebody provides you with information which demonstrates that a survey looks to be wrong, do they have to request in the letter that they submit the information to you with that the survey be revoked, or is that a decision that you would take based on the information being provided?
It's a decision I would take after looking into the matter and determining that the allegation is true.
And how long would that process normally take?
To my mind, it hasn't happened yet, but I would think that once it's submitted to the chief surveyor, it can be acted on in a very short time and reviewed. And if it's found to be true, then he can immediately revoke the survey.
You say it hasn't happened yet.
As far as I know,
Have you not been made aware by the Director of Planning that such a situation could well exist in my constituency?
I have been made aware of a plan submitted to the director, but that is not an authenticated plan. It didn't come to the chief surveyor. I was advised of it through the director of planning, and that was not one that was submitted, as far as I could recall, to Lands and Survey to be authenticated or to be checked in any way. If we're talking about the same thing, sir.
Well, you say you don't know about it, so I don't know if you're talking about the same thing, but if you want, I can.
Might I just interject? Just to make sure that we're following each other in the right way. I think what the director is saying is that if it hasn't come to him to be authenticated and it was brought to the planning department and he verifies that it hasn't come to him, then it would be an issue that planning would have to deal with, not him, is what he's saying. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Is it possible that somebody could submit a survey to planning that was not authenticated by you, by your department?
I think the director of planning would speak to that directly, but yes.
Well,
Yes.
His vote coming up.
Yes, absolutely. And in this case, I think that was it. That it was submitted, and the first knowledge I had of it was from the director of planning.
In this case, is it possible for the parties concerned to now apply directly to you as chief surveyor for action to be taken to authenticate the survey?
They would have the parties or the licensed land surveyor.
Well, I think it
For
would have to be
clarification.
the parties that are complaining,
Oh, yes. Well, they could lodge a complaint with me, and then I could follow it up.
and that would simply need to be a letter with the supporting documentation by another licensed surveyor who has surveyed it on their behalf
Well,
and demonstrates that the original survey was substantially inaccurate.
it would be a letter from the stakeholders or the concerned parties, and then I would look into it and compare it against any other survey that we have. If necessary, do a site visit and then determine what the mean high water mark is. However, I must say that the mean high water mark has always been like a snapshot as at that
sir.
time.
I'm 62 years old, and we're talking about a ledge and sand that hasn't moved, and I can at least remember going there when I was 10 years old, and it hasn't moved since that.
I was going to
Still in the same place.
I was going to continue, sir, unless it was iron shore or a solid wall.
Okay.
But in all other circumstances, it could change immediately the day you surveyed it.
And the one is that currently been accepted, the water now catches me around my shoulder.
By planning,
Yeah.
yes, I don't.
Okay, I'll see that letter is forthcoming within 24 hours to your office.
Okay, I can assure you we'll act on it.
Thank you. If there are no further questions, we will proceed to vote on this particular appropriation. So all those in favor of PAH 9, Management of Land Information for $2,942,404, standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye. Aye. Those against, no. Also, we had deferred the vote on PAH 4. Are we in a position to provide that information and proceed to vote, or should we continue? PAH 4 was Management of Public Recreational Facilities and Cemeteries. Yes, sir.
Do we have that information yet?
Okay, we'll proceed and then we can always come to that. PAH 10, Management of Government Properties, $12,720,624, found on page 136 of the annual plan and estimates. Are there any questions? Mr. McLean?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to ask the minister if he could carry on with what he was trying to tell me about. Something had been done this week on the facilities management with the young man, Mr. Worms, no? That we had visited, in particular the civic centers.
Yeah, just continuing up. I was speaking about, I think it was the Gun Bay Civic Center, and there were some roof repairs that needed to be done. And I was just informing the minister that the letters of intent had been sent out to advise the persons who bid, who had won, well, to advise the person who won, or the entity that is to be awarded a contract, and they're just waiting for Public Works to finish the actual contract so that both parties can sign it, that work can begin. And that is expected to start within a week from now.
Mr. Chairman, I think Mr. Worms know, the minister might know, that it is important that these repairs are effected immediately.
Yes.
Because of the hurricane season.
We've had discussions on this, Mr. Worms and myself.
Good. And what about the repairs on the William Allen McLaughlin Civic Center? You know, there were a number of repairs that we identified there.
Okay. That might, if to be specific, just so that we're making sure we're on the same page, are we speaking about some cabinet works in the kitchen and stuff like that?
Yes, and some outside work.
Right. They've sent the bids out, bids have come back in, and they're dealing now with awarding the contracts, and they're following it up and doing it as swiftly as they can.
Okay. I know, Mr. Chairman, they're trying to paint the library in East End as well. Why is it that we never had the management of libraries under government properties? Why is it that we continue to leave them under the Ministry of Education?
Well, I think, I can't swear to this, and I'm not so sure I'm 100% qualified, but I do believe that it is simply because, just like other educational facilities, libraries are considered under education, so they get lumped along with the other educational facilities. As the minister will know, facilities management doesn't take care of other educational, as the member will know. Facilities management doesn't take care of all of those buildings that we're speaking to, so I think that's the rationale as I understand it. And they also have their own facilities unit, which takes care of maintenance.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I would just like to ask further, on the paving of the grounds, the parking lot, and the road into the William Allen McLaughlin Civic Center. Keeping in mind that's the grandfather of the premier, you know.
Have you requested it?
Are we going to pave that? Because I've asked since 2009 to get it paved.
Who went to that? Mr. Chair, I'm just wanting to make sure that this was one of the requests that was put in writing when the member visited Cabinet.
Yes, sir.
Right. Okay. I just want to make sure that we weren't doubling up on that. We were getting costings on it, and it can easily become and will become part of a list. And when we are to the point where we have confirmed the allocations for the NRA, we will discuss with members priorities to ensure that we are not doing anything that we are following priorities that the members would like for us. I see here where we have these estimates: the Seaview Road Park paving, 1.6 million. John McLean Drive extension west to High Rock, 1.6 million. Farm Road into the Salinas, 360,000. Extension and completion of Sunnyfield Drive, 120,000. And access roads and parking area at the Civic Center to be determined. So just to say to you that that's the follow-up from the wish list sent to us, and we will have a look at everything and see exactly what can and cannot be done in this fiscal year coming up.
Mr. Chairman, Minister, I mean, extend this discussion because we can do it when we reach NRA, but look like all we know is 1.6. That's 1.6 there.
I know that's so, but I didn't do the calculations. I will have read what I saw.
1.6 to do that Seaview Road, that little bit of milling and paving. Hey, I know you're not, you don't even go there and measure it. That's not your job. But Lord have mercy upon us. And we'll continue that one when we do the NRA, because they came up and did 12 feet and then carry the equipment down and they'll come back up, do the rest.
Okay, Mr. McLean, if there's no further question. Mr. Miller?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you. I wonder if the Minister could tell me, or one of his technical staff, what are the duties and responsibilities of the caretakers at these civic centers?
Troy Worms, Acting Facilities Manager, Ministry of Planning, Land, Agriculture, Housing and Infrastructure.
Thank you.
In respect to the caretakers, sir, they are really an extension of our department. Our department is 3 people in respect to maintaining our facilities, and they act on our behalf to let us know when there are issues at the current facilities. They also open and close for us for bookings and respond to fire alarms periodically throughout the day. They're our first response on site, and typically they advise us as to what's happening on a day-to-day basis, as well as general cleaning before a booking or event. And after the event, there's a cleanup, a basic cleanup, but not a detailed, deep cleaning, if you understand.
But I don't understand, because most of the people that rent the north side of the Kiraki Bank Civic Center are basically told that they have to clean up after the event, and oftentimes they're expected to clean before the event as well. But a larger question is, so you're saying that it is not the role of the caretaker to perform any maintenance. Their role is simply to report it to you.
Correct. in respect to the cleaning, why we ask people to clean up after themselves is really in respect to large events. If we were to rent to, I guess, members of the community, and they would have to provide a professional cleaning service after their event, we can accommodate that. But in order to reduce costs, we ask people to clean up after their large events themselves. If not, the department, the government has to pay for that.
Do you have any access to a team that can do minor repairs and maintenance?
Within the department, no, sir, but we do utilize Public Works. They're our first point of contact. If they're unavailable for whatever reasons, that's when we subcontract.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, would it be possible for the ministry to consider, in cases where you have a caretaker who's capable of doing these minor repairs, that you reward them in addition, either on a per hour basis or on a per job basis? Because my experience with the Cayman Bank Civic Center is that little maintenance things seems to take a long time to get done, and they never get done.
To you, Mr. Chair, I think that can be explored because, to be honest with you, we're going through that process of ensuring that all caretakers have business license. So as long as they have the appropriate license, I think a consideration can be made.
I think he brought it up.
Okay. Mr. Chair, if I might just make a small intervention. One of the, it's not a difficulty, but one of the things that simply is that the Public Works Department is being paid by way of salaries, and this that we're talking about is part and parcel of the tasks that they perform. As a matter of cost to the government, and I believe I understand the member's point, unless there is a situation where Public Works is tardy in response, and we are aware of that, then we wouldn't wish to have to engage in that on a regular basis, because it would simply increase the cost. If the member is having great difficulty with keeping the Cayman Bank's Civic Center maintained properly, and there's evidence of that, then we need to find out what's the best way to correct it. Because I think you're looking for a solution. So perhaps we can have that dialogue, but appreciate why it's not that easy to simply say, not a problem, we can do it that way, because it simply means more cost.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I'm not so sure it would be more cost, because if I was to relate what the process was to change a door lock, we will see that it costs substantially more, because I think 3 trips by Public Works to change one door lock. The other thing is, when it comes to scheduling the maintenance, the Cayman Bank Civic Center was painted 4 years ago by the community themselves, and we had to fix the roof ourselves because hurricane season was coming up and it was leaking. It has not been painted since. All of the aluminum rails are in a disgraceful state in terms of the need for paint, and some other stuff.
Rails need painting?
Yeah, because they painted them white.
Okay.
And you know what happens now outside, and that's all spray.
Okay.
Looking glass rust. And I don't think they've ever been painted since they were put up. People who walk by them now are getting the flakes on their clothes and on their hands, and some of the, for instance, I can tell in the north side of the building, the tin clips that were put on to hold up the propane line are disgraceful. There's rust stains running down from these clips that are rusted, and nobody seems to think that it would be much cheaper every year to replace these $1.50 clips than it is to wait 4 years, and now the marmoran needs to be redone because it's all stained with rust.
I think the member's point is well made, and I think the Director of Public Works is here. Also, the Facilities Manager is here, and I think that they are taking the point very well and will take whatever remedial action is necessary.
But, and Mr. Minister, I'm available to meet with him at any time, and I know that the manager of my office works very well with the facilities manager in trying to get things done, but for some reason there seems to be some things slipping through the cracks that are costing the country a lot of money.
Thank you. Mr. Miller,
I have one more question. I think the facility manager said that as long as the person has a business license, that's a question I have. Is it not possible to let Caymanians bid on something like a caretaker without going to the expense of taking out a business license, and if they are successful in that they are the best bid, they can then be asked to go and do a business license? Because
that is exactly what occurs.
No, sir.
Yes, sir. When I say yes, sir, we discussed the matter. The reason why I'm jumping the gun, because I discussed the matter personally with the facilities manager when people were making that observation to me, and he made sure to advise people that that is when they would have to get the business license.
thank you.
I can, go ahead, you go ahead.
If I may, Mr. Chair, we've been through the process with the current caretakers for probably about a year now, notifying them that this day is coming, and we have the bids back in to go through that selection process. We've actually been delaying it to ensure that people would not be disqualified based on technicality, and that we ensure that we provide as much information as they need to get themselves compliant. We've been in contact with every single caretaker, probably on a weekly or bi-weekly basis, to ensure that this is happening. There is some resistance to that because people are claiming that they currently have the post, they have the job, and more or less, why should they need a business license to do what they have been doing for many years? And the truth of the matter is, from a financial perspective, we are not supposed to pay people unless they have a business license, and that's what it really comes down to. Correct. The way it's drafted, if I may, Mr. Chair, the way it's drafted for the tender, I'm not asking people to give me a business license up front to bid for the caretaker services. You will require to have that business license to obtain the contract, but we were not telling people to go in advance to get those business licenses for specifically the caretakers that have been there for long periods of time.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. McLean, Mr. Eden was trying to ask a question before you, sir. Mr. Eden?
I could sit down and cry sometime, Mr. Chairman. From time I can remember, these caretakers has been, and I specifically referring to James Manoa, individuals doing, as far as I know, a pretty good job. Now here we are coming about a business license. How much more bureaucracy we could put that these handful of people that striving to make a living, and now you're talking about bringing a business license? Truth to my goodness, I don't know what next we could come up with.
Mr. Chairman.
And I understand the public management, finance law, and whatever the nonsense that entitles this, but when we can start a trust as Caymanians,
Mr. Chairman, I just want to say this, that I totally understand
Mr.
Yeah, if I might, I just want to say to you that I totally understand exactly what Mr. Eden is saying, and I have gone through the situation with the facilities manager, understanding exactly what everybody else has said. But this is something that is coming from finance. These are instructions to them, yes. And that's why I say what I'm saying. Now, I'm not 100% sure which statute it is, but my understanding from the facilities manager is that it's a directive from finance saying that anyone who is doing business with the government has to have a trade and business license or having any contractual arrangements.
It's
So
not something
if
that...
there's a way to correct that, I'm happy to have it corrected.
It's not something that I myself or the financial secretary is directly aware of.
I quite appreciate that.
No, but just to say that, is it the case, we will, during the break, we will try to understand where this requirement came from, and then we will report to the committee after that. But just for the sake of the public understanding the requirements for this, roughly how much is each caretaker paid on an annual basis? Because if it's an immaterial sum of money, then that you may argue that the trade and business license is unnecessary. But if it is a material sum, then it's justifiable.
Mr. Chairman, if you want an exact example, I can tell you that at the school in Cayman Brac, for somebody to be able to be hired to fix the fence, they would not be able to be hired unless they had a trade and business license. So that would mean for a $200 job, they would have to get a trade and business license.
Mr. Worms, are you able to answer the question? Roughly how much is it per year that a caretaker receives in payment?
There's an average right now, and I would speak across the board for all caretakers.
Yes, that's what I'm...
It's $40,000 for all facilities for the year for an approximate.
All facilities?
Correct.
Total?
Correct.
No, hold on. You answered the question your answer wasn't clear. You said an average. Is it on average 40,000 per location or total?
Total.
How many caretakers do we have?
Presently, 5.
So that's $8,000 per year, average. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, we will proceed to take, I'll try to determine the exact reason why this trade and business license is a requirement, but the sum does seem to be immaterial on the grand scheme of things. It may be another reason other than just the financial amount. It may be something to do with liability on the part of the government, but I'll try to find out and report to the House. We will take the vote on this particular appropriation, and then we'll take the break. Mr. Suku, you had a quick question?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you, could the minister or one of his staff advise us if there are any plans in place to remedy the parking situation at the Bordentown Police Station? Because I'm aware that during times that it's raining and so on, it floods easily, it gets mucky, and the officers don't have any cover, so they're in and out of the rain all the time.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, just to say to you that unfortunately I don't know if the right people know about this. I certainly will, now that it's brought to my attention, I will have the situation investigated. But new to me.
Okay. Mr. Bush, you had a question?
Yes, just one question. I might get the same answer I got before, but just to be sure that the amount for management of government properties, $12
million.
Last year, $12,936,301, as against $12,720 $720,624 for the work going up from 4 to 6,000, now 6 to 8,000. But the minister said earlier that, and that's because they're trying to do more with less. But I think is it sustainable what's happening here?
Well, just
Because several ministers now I hear you saying that, but is one old woman say West Bay, I know what I know.
Mr. Chair, here's what I'm advised. That in the past there were some what were termed regular maintenance jobs that were done on a regular basis. Some of them in a more in-depth look not being considered necessary to be done as often. Because we know of the budget constraints, what they have done is to look very closely with a budget that is less to ensure that maintenance is prioritized. And when the leader of the opposition asks if it's sustainable, I'm not suggesting for a minute that it is sustainable. I'm saying that for now, this is what we have to work with as best we could share up the pie, and they are going to be doing the best they can to get the best results, but making sure that everything is done in order of priority.
Yes.
And I can't say anything else about it.
I'm in sympathy with the minister, Mr. Chairman. I've been there before, and he's been on this side.
Thank you, Mr. Bush.
Mr. Chairman, just to clarify one issue that we talked about before with regards to those individuals who are caretakers, just to make sure people understand. And I want to make this point because I can tell you that if there is a way to remedy this situation, I'm sure every single one of us would welcome it. Some caretakers are paid $400 a month. Some caretakers are paid $1,800 a month, depending on the size of the job. But the 5 caretakers, as I understand it, the total cost on an annual basis for those 5 caretakers is $40,000 annually. So I say that to say when we talk about a business license, and I know that was what you were trying to get at, to me, if there is a way to be able to engage in the contract without forcing that on, I certainly know that myself and facilities management would welcome it.
But just for the sake of understanding, those caretakers, this isn't their only source of income.
Some of them it is.
Okay, fair enough.
Mr. Chairman, why do you need a business license? Why not a simple letter of employment between them and government?
That's something we're going to try to clarify.
Whether it's a business license as you
It
know
is said
it's
that
a
it's a
trade and
business
business, or whether it is something else.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because a simple letter of employment should be able to give
There was a
conditions.
recent HR audit where it was flagged, and it was said that no person or entity doing business with the government should be able to do so without a valid trade and business license. So all I'm
Yeah, but
saying
they don't make, Mr. Chairman, they can't make policy for cabinet. Cabinet makes the policy.
I think I comprehend what it is now.
Okay.
You said an HR audit, so perhaps they're trying to distinguish between a contract for service and a contract of service. The contract of service being the employee, and the contract for service being the person you contract to do business with. I think that's what they're trying to
right,
ensure, so that there's no liability coming to the government for an employee.
But through you, sir, to Mr. Bush, all of us want the same thing to happen. I'm only flagging it up where it's at so that we can follow it up and do what is supposed to be done.
We tell them that's kind of bureaucracy. That's what's killing this country.
I think I comprehend what it is. We'll try to make sure
There's a contract or a business license, though, Mr. Chairman, that whatever the wording is either a contract or if it's a business license, and a business license means trade and business, but that's a different thing. If it is a contract, which, like I said, 2-page contract should be able to do for them,
Well, no,
but, you know, you leave the government lawyers to do the work there. We can only speak from what we believe.
Mr. McLean,
Yes, yes, sir.
See why I raised it?
Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to ask a question, but I also want to say that all two mine only about $400 a month. They have nothing else to do in this life, and they try and survive off that little cleaning thing. Even their children go help them with it, so
But
that
So a $300 a year license means
if I may interject, gentlemen.
700.
Gentlemen, if I may interject, we just went through the budget address. Within that, we said we were doing several things for small business. It is perhaps possible that these trade and business license for these people who have only this one contract, we may be able to do something about that. Let us not waste another half an hour arguing about a trade and business license where we're not even sure as to the reason why. I have said I will try to determine the reason for it and report to the committee, and I'll do that for tomorrow. So we will now take the vote on this appropriation, and then we'll take a break. All those in favor of PAH 10, Management of Government Properties, $12,720,624, standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, no. Thank you. We will now take a break and resume proceedings at 5 p.m. We keep saying quarter to and no one shows up. We will say 10 to and we will resume sharply at 10 to. That's sufficient time.